Pastor Elijah Brooks arrived in Darlington during the spring of 2016. He wasn't like the usual church leaders the town had seen before. He was younger, charismatic, and had an air of confidence that made people listen. His sermons were powerful, but comforting. He spoke about love, faith, and forgiveness in a way that made the congregation feel seen. Within months, the church pews were filled every Sunday, and Elijah became more than just a pastor. He became a figure of trust, hope, and admiration. People believed he was a gift from God, someone sent to heal their spiritual wounds. They never questioned his past. They never asked about his life before Darlington. He was a mystery wrapped in holiness, and no one dared to look beyond the surface. But behind the soft smiles and soothing words was a man hiding something darker, something dangerous. Among his most devoted followers were Clara and Naomi Mitchell. The sisters had grown up in Darlington, raised in a strict household where church was not just a place, it was the center of their lives. Clara, the older sister, was steady and dependable. She volunteered at the church office, organized community events, and handled paperwork for Elijah without ever asking questions. Naomi, on the other hand, was lively and bold. She led the youth choir, often stayed after service to help clean, and had a natural charm that made people gravitate toward her. Elijah noticed both sisters from the beginning. At first, it was innocent, friendly conversations, shared smiles, moments of connection after sermons. But slowly, those moments turned into something else. He began spending time alone with Clara in his office under the pretense of planning church activities. He told her she was special, chosen by God for a higher purpose. Clara believed him. She thought their connection was divine. She never imagined he was saying the same things to her sister with Naomi. Things were different. Elijah invited her to his private cabin just outside town, saying he needed help preparing for youth retreats. She agreed, flattered by his attention. Their meetings became frequent, then intimate. Naomi believed she was in love. Elijah told her he felt the same. What neither sister knew was that Elijah was juggling them both, feeding them lies, building two different relationships behind the same pulpit. He was careful, strategic. He deleted messages, created separate schedules, and kept their meetings far apart. For over a year, the secret affair continued without suspicion. Elijah had convinced himself he was in control. But secrets always have a way of slipping through cracks. One Sunday evening, Clara borrowed Elijah's car to run an errand. In the back seat, she found Naomi's scarf, one she had gifted her sister months earlier. Her heart sank. Questions filled her mind, but she said nothing. She went home and started searching for answers. Her instincts led her to old texts, overlapping dates, and strange behavior. It didn't take long before the truth surfaced. She wasn't the only woman in Elijah's life. And the other woman was her own sister. What followed was quiet chaos. Clara didn't confront Elijah. She didn't scream or cry. Instead, she watched. She observed. She waited. Bitterness took root in her heart, and everything around her began to twist. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was spiritual. The man she trusted as a guide, a holy leader, had manipulated her faith and her love. Her pain grew into something else. Something dark. Something dangerous. By the time Naomi discovered the truth herself, it was already too late. The wheels were turning. The bond between sisters had cracked, and the man who had once brought them closer was now the source of something that would tear everything apart. What had started as a hidden romance was about to spiral into a bloody disaster that no sermon could ever forgive. Clara stopped attending church the following week. People noticed her absence, but no one asked questions. She claimed she wasn't feeling well, and most believed it. But the truth was far more complicated. She had uncovered everything, every text, every photo, every lie. She now knew that Elijah had been seeing Naomi behind her back, while telling her they had a future together. Worse, she knew Naomi had kept it a secret. Whether out of guilt or ignorance, it didn't matter. In Clara's mind, they had both betrayed her. At first, she thought of leaving town. She imagined packing her bags, resigning from the church, and never looking back. But that idea quickly faded. She wasn't someone who ran. She had sacrificed too much. She had built her life around faith, loyalty, and Elijah. Now that all of it had collapsed, something inside her shifted. She became quiet, methodical, focused. Her pain turned to rage, but it was hidden behind a calm mask. Naomi, on the other hand, had no idea what Clara knew. She continued seeing Elijah, still thinking she was his only love. She believed the future was bright, that once the time was right, they'd go public, maybe even marry. Elijah played along, assuring her that everything was under control. He was skilled at deception. He'd spent years perfecting it. But even he could sense that something had changed. Clara's absence from church wasn't just physical, it was a warning sign. Elijah tried reaching out to Clara, sending messages, calling her late at night. She never responded. He didn't know if she was angry, heartbroken, or planning something. The silence unnerved him. He became paranoid, checking over his shoulder, double-locking his doors, wondering who she might have talked to. His sermons became less passionate. His confidence began to crack. Clara, meanwhile, was documenting everything. She started writing. In a notebook, every lie, every detail, every interaction between Elijah and Naomi. She even followed them once, from a distance, watching them laugh outside a restaurant on the edge of town. Her hands trembled as she took photos through her windshield. To her, it wasn't just an affair. It was a betrayal wrapped in hypocrisy. A man of God, preaching virtue while destroying lives behind closed doors. It was during this time that Naomi began to sense something strange. Clara had become cold, distant. They had once spoken every day, shared dinners, laughed about old memories. Now Naomi's texts went unanswered. Her calls were ignored. At first, she assumed Clara was just busy. But soon, suspicion grew. Something felt wrong. One evening, Naomi decided to confront Elijah. She asked him directly if he had ever been involved with her sister. He denied it with practiced ease, brushing off the question with a smile. Naomi left unsure but unsettled. Later that night, curiosity got the better of her. She borrowed his phone while he was in the shower and went through his deleted messages. What she found was undeniable months of exchanges with Clara, all laced with affection, promises, and plans. Her world collapsed in an instant. Naomi didn't scream, she didn't cry. She quietly returned the phone and left his house without a word. By the next morning, she had packed her bags and moved into a motel on the edge of town. She texted Clara a single message, "We need to talk." Clara never replied. The bond between the sisters was shattered. And Elijah, once so confident in his manipulations, had finally lost control. Each of them was now spiraling in their own direction, carrying secrets, rage, and heartbreak. What none of them realized was that this love triangle was no longer about emotion. It had crossed into something far darker. The story was no longer about betrayal. It was now about consequences. And the blood had yet to spill. Elijah sat alone in his cabin one Friday evening, staring into the fire, a glass of whiskey untouched beside him. The lies he had carefully stacked were beginning to collapse. Naomi had stopped returning his calls. Clara had vanished into silence. For the first time in years, the pastor who always had the right words to say now had none. The cabin, once a secret haven for his double life, had become a prison of his own making. He could feel something was coming, though he didn't know when or how. He had underestimated both sisters. That would be his final mistake. Naomi didn't tell anyone where she was going that weekend. She left the motel early Saturday morning and drove toward the cabin. Despite the betrayal, a part of her still wanted answers. She wanted to look Elijah in the eye and hear the truth come from his mouth. She needed closure or perhaps revenge. In her bag was a small audio recorder, something she had borrowed from the church office before she left. She planned to record everything. If he admitted what he had done, she would have proof. If he lied again, she would know for sure. Either way, she was ready. Unbeknownst to Naomi, Clara was already watching. She had followed Naomi from the motel at a distance, keeping to the shadows, headlights off. For days, Clara had monitored their movements, waiting for the right moment. In her mind, the betrayal had fused into a single source, Elijah and Naomi, together, conspiring, laughing behind her back. It didn't matter anymore who was more guilty. To her, they were one and the same. And she had made a decision. This weekend would be the end of it. Clara parked her car a short distance from the cabin and slipped through the woods, her footsteps light on the damp earth. She carried a backpack filled with things she had gathered quietly over weeks, a hammer, gloves, and a long kitchen knife wrapped in cloth. Her heart beat slow and steady. There was no panic, only purpose. She had convinced herself that justice was no longer found in courts or prayers. It had to be taken. Naomi arrived at the cabin just before dark. Elijah opened the door with hesitation. She walked past him without a word and sat near the fire. Tension filled the room like thick smoke. He tried to talk, to explain, but Naomi held up her hand and pressed record. Elijah's face went pale. For once, he realized the control he had was slipping beyond repair. The conversation was quiet, almost calm, but layered with intensity. Naomi asked questions. Elijah gave half-truths. Somewhere deep inside, both knew the relationship was over. Outside, Clara waited for the moment when all voices fell silent. She crept closer, peeking through the small cabin window. Her grip tightened on the knife in her bag. She saw Elijah standing near the fireplace, Naomi seated with the recorder still running. The image burned into her mind, a final picture of betrayal, frozen in time. The door creaked open slowly. Neither Elijah nor Naomi heard it. Clara stepped inside, unnoticed, her shadow stretching along the wooden floorboards. It was the moment she had imagined countless times. But reality moved faster than her thoughts. In seconds, chaos erupted. A scream, a crash, the sound of breaking glass. By the time it was over, only silence remained. The fire crackled gently, as if unaware of the violence that had taken place. Blood stained the rug. One body was motionless near the wall, another slumped in the armchair. The recorder, still running, captured the final moments before it too went silent. Outside, Clara disappeared into the night, leaving behind everything: her faith, her family, and the final pieces of a secret now soaked in blood. Asterisk the following morning, the air in Darlington was thick with fog. A local hiker named Roy Jensen was walking the trail near the woods when he noticed something unusual. The cabin door stood wide open, swaying slightly in the breeze. It was strange, especially for Elijah's place, which was usually locked tight. Roy stepped closer, calling out. No answer came. The silence unsettled him. When he finally entered, the scene inside froze him in place. The living room was covered in blood. Elijah's body was slumped in an armchair, lifeless, with multiple stab wounds to the chest. Nearby, Naomi lay face down on the floor, her head bloodied, shards of glass scattered around her. The fire in the hearth had burned low, casting flickering shadows across the walls. Roy stumbled back in horror and called the police immediately. Within an hour, the cabin was swarmed with investigators, tape, flashing lights, and stunned silence. Detectives examined the scene with precision. There were no signs of forced entry, no defensive wounds on Elijah's body. The knife used in the stabbing was missing. Naomi had trauma to the head, consistent with blunt force. The only item out of place was a small audio recorder found near her body. It had stopped recording after 74 minutes. When police played it back, they heard the entire confrontation, Naomi accusing Elijah, Elijah confessing to some truths, and then a sudden interruption, a loud crash, a scream. Then silence. It didn't take long for authorities to notice who was missing. Clara. Her car was found nearly 2 miles from the cabin, half hidden behind a tree line. The driver's seat was pushed forward, the glove box left open. Her phone was still inside. No one had seen her since Friday evening. The town, once again, was gripped by panic. Rumors spread fast. Some believed Clara had killed them both and fled. Others thought she might be dead, lost somewhere in the woods. Search teams were dispatched. Dogs were brought in. Helicopters scanned the area for signs of movement. For 2 days, nothing surfaced. Then, just after midnight on Tuesday, Clara walked into the Darlington police station barefoot, bruised, and pale. Her clothes were torn, her hands scraped. She didn't speak a word. She simply placed a blood-stained notebook on the front desk and sat down. Officers rushed to secure her and began reviewing the journal. Inside were handwritten pages describing the past few weeks in chilling detail, her discovery of the affair, her rage, her planning, and finally, the events of that night. According to her account, Clara had followed Naomi to the cabin, intending only to confront them both. But when she saw them together, something inside her broke. She entered quietly, armed with a knife. Naomi screamed when she saw her. Elijah tried to intervene, and in the struggle, Clara stabbed him. Naomi attempted to run but slipped on the rug. Clara hit her with a wine bottle. She wrote that it was never supposed to go that far, that she lost control. The journal was a confession in her own words, but there was still no murder weapon. Clara refused to answer any questions. She wouldn't say where she had gone after the killings or how she had survived the 2 nights in the woods. Her silence unsettled investigators. Psychological evaluations began immediately. Some experts said she was in shock. Others believed she was calculating, using her silence to maintain control. What no one could deny was that she had shattered the lives of everyone around her in one night of violence. News of the crime spread beyond Darlington. Media vans parked outside the church. Reporters swarmed the streets. The story of the beloved pastor, the secret affairs, the sisters, and the double homicide captured national attention. But inside the quiet interrogation room, Clara simply stared ahead, unblinking. The trial hadn't started yet. But the blood had already spoken. Clara's trial began 6 months later, under intense media coverage and public scrutiny. The courtroom was packed daily with reporters, former churchgoers, and residents of Darlington who still couldn't reconcile the soft-spoken church secretary with the woman now accused of a double murder. The prosecution laid out a chilling narrative. They presented the audio recording from the cabin, which ended in sudden chaos, and Clara's own journal, filled with detailed accounts of her emotional descent and her plans to confront Elijah and Naomi. Though the murder weapon was never recovered, the evidence painted a damning picture. They argued that Clara had premeditated the murders, slowly unraveling in the weeks after discovering the affair. Her journal entries weren't the writings of a broken-hearted woman. They were methodical, cold, and filled with intentions. The district attorney pointed to specific passages where Clara described following Naomi, buying gloves, and rehearsing what she would say. One sentence stood out: "If they both must fall, so be it. Some sins don't deserve mercy." The defense took a different approach. They didn't deny that Clara had been at the cabin or that she had written the journal, but they claimed she never planned to kill anyone. They painted her as a victim of emotional manipulation, deeply betrayed by both her spiritual leader and her own sister. According to them, the events of that night were chaotic, unplanned, and tragic. They described Clara as a woman pushed beyond her limits, acting out of shock and heartbreak, not evil. The jury listened carefully, but the atmosphere in the courtroom was heavy. Photos of the crime scene were displayed. The audio from Naomi's recorder was played again and again. Some jurors wiped away tears. Others looked away. Clara remained still, showing no visible emotion throughout the proceedings. When asked to testify, she declined. Her silence, which had followed her since the day she walked into the police station, became one of the trial's defining features. After 3 weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for 4 days. They returned with a verdict: guilty on 2 counts of first-degree murder. Clara was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As she was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, she didn't look at anyone. She kept her eyes forward, the same way she had during every sermon she once helped organize, the same way she had written in her journal with steady hands. The town of Darlington was never the same after that. The church closed its doors permanently. The congregation scattered. Some moved away entirely, unable to bear the memory of what had happened. Others stayed but avoided speaking about the case, as if silence might somehow erase it. Elijah's name was quietly removed from the church. Plaque. Naomi was buried beside her parents, but few attended the funeral. The cabin, still standing at the edge of the woods, became a symbol of tragedy. No one went near it. Over time, vines crept up its walls, windows cracked, and the path leading to it grew wild. It was as if nature itself was trying to bury the memory. Years passed, but the story of Pastor Elijah Brooks and the Mitchell sisters remained a dark legend in Darlington. The tale of love, lies, and betrayal that turned into bloodshed became a cautionary whisper told to newcomers. Behind every Sunday sermon, behind every choir performance, behind every perfect smile, the town had learned that darkness can live where you least expect it, and that even those who speak of salvation can fall the farthest.